Hello, future graduate students, and also to the graduate students who are already on their graduate studies and their graduate programs. My name is Dr. M, and I welcome you to this YouTube channel. And on this channel, I just share tips and some strategies that could be helpful for you as you undergo your own program, your own graduate program. Now, today I want to talk about something. What do you do to write academically, right? This is something that you have heard often being said by supervisors, by your committee, and your reviewers, and everybody that actually looks at your work in one way or another. So, what is academic writing? Usually you would hear supervisors talk about, or make comments such as, you have written or you are writing more in a descriptive style, and we expect you to write critically. So in most of our African countries, unfortunately, education is taught in such a way when children go into elementary school or primary school, there is no training in terms of how do you write critically, how do you become a sieve. They are taught in a sense that, mostly it's like you are a sponge and you absorb whatever is being given to you. So the person goes through the primary school or the elementary education, high school, and then going to the graduate programs where they are expected to write critically, to think critically, which becomes a challenge for most students. So what are you doing to acquire that skill that will enable you to write, critically, where you can become a sieve and, question, analyze, interact with the information, with the data that you are, coming across as you go on writing your thesis, as you go on writing a literature review, as you go on writing your dissertations, right? So this is a process where you actually just don't accept anything that you come across, because people will go on and say, so and so said, according to so and so, so and so supports this. But where is your voice in all that, in that information, in that data that you are putting across, right? So the way you do that is you are going to look at what other authors have written about this topic. What do they say? Do you agree? Do you not agree? And if you agree with those authors, why? If you disagree, why? Right? And are you finding gaps as you are reading and interacting with this literature or with that literature? What are those gaps, and what solutions can you propose, right? So that you are contributing to the knowledge that is going to emerge at the end of your study, and not just receiving everything and repeating and summarizing what other authors have already written. So you go on, according to so and so, according to so and so, so and so said. Yes, that is factual, but how does that apply to your study? How does that become relevant to the problem that you're trying to solve, right? So you must come across that information, critique it, not criticize, because that's the other mistake that students make or candidates make. They go on to criticize every point. That's not how to do it. You are just interrogating the information that has been put there. And if, for example, you were to use the same methods that were used in coming up with the conclusions of that study, would other people arrive at the same? Want to look at the methods and the methodology that was used in the study that you read or you came across, and you want to look at how they actually arrived at the findings that they came up with. Okay, you might want to look at maybe the sample size. What was the sample size that they used? If it's a quantitative study, you are looking to make generalizations, so the sample size must not be very small, because it becomes insignificant, right? In trying to generalize. However, if your study is qualitative, you want to look at For example, how did they analyze this data? Did they use thematic analysis, content analysis, systematic analysis? What did they use? How did they arrive at their findings? What do other studies show? Which methodologies did they use to conduct a similar study? And that is where you begin to compare the gaps and find those gaps that will make your study different, you know. And if you are doing a PhD, you must always come up with something new. And unfortunately, a lot of people think that something new is going to be huge, it's going to be significant, it's going to be groundbreaking. Yes, there are times that the findings are groundbreaking, that they're new, you know, like that. And very few people have actually, you know, undertaken a study of that nature. You understand? And also, when you talk about innovation, this is when now you come up with groundbreaking results. Most of the studies, however, find something new, yes, but how that newness is, you know, contextualized is what matters. So you find that the findings are not such a huge new find, right? But perhaps it is looking at the same issue, the same problem, but from a different perspective. For example, you would be looking at maybe gender, you know. So maybe this is a study that has most or predominantly been done having surveyed male participants, research participants. So you could come in and say, the studies that you've come across maybe have used mostly males or male participants. So this study is now going to look at female or other people who identify themselves with other pronouns, right? That is where your newness would come in. And this is where now you begin to critique, why is that problematic? If others have done it and it was not, you know, focusing on women of a certain age, for example, how is that a problem? And now you begin to find arguments that are going to counter the use of only male participants. Maybe you want to use ethnicity. I don't know, maybe age, maybe region. Okay, so you look for studies that have been conducted on a similar topic, you know, not the same, but similar. And they found, you know, different outcomes because of the number of or the size of the sample, maybe because of the composition of the research participants, maybe because of the theoretical frameworks that were used. Yeah, so you look for all these things that you can use, the, you know, the differences, the gaps that you are encountering as you conduct your study, and you are able now to use that information or to use that data to argue in your case, right? And the easiest way that I ask or, you know, advise students to do is to come up with what I call a data extraction table, where you extract the information of the different studies in that area and look at, for example, look at the sample size, look at methodology, look at the main arguments, look at the findings, look at what was the, you know, recommendations for even future research. And then you do that for all the sources that you find and compare and contrast. I'm telling you, you will find the gaps that you need to use in order to write and to make those arguments and suggest what could be done differently, you know. And that gives you that, you know, academic sense of sieving what others have written and how you know, you think, or what data is showing you and what you can recommend for future studies, or for even, you know, coming up with solutions to the problem that you are solving. Okay, so as you conduct that research, always remember to think critically, not to criticize your work, not to criticize your own sources, but to critique. Find the gaps. What are the issues that can be done differently, right? because most of these topics have already been tackled in one way or another. So what could be done differently? What is that thing that is missing or that you can add? That is where your uniqueness would come in. So you will argue and say, no, the studies by so and so used a small sample size, maybe of I don't know, 25. Maybe it was a qualitative study. So my study is going to look at a broader context by using a bigger sample through a quantitative analysis, so maybe, or a quantitative approach, or maybe even a mixed methodology, right? So then that gives you a uniqueness. And then you just don't end there. You go on to explain why using that that other methodology adds value. Why is it even necessary? So you have to change the way you think about the data that you come across as you are reading your literature review, as you're reading your articles, as you are reading the different types of sources that you will consult for your study. Okay, so happy writing. I hope that this video was, insightful to you. And if you like such content, please remember to share, comment, and like. And, always look out for our new videos.